Yo guys, welcome back to another video. In this one, we're going to be learning how you can still place well in tournaments on High Ping. And today we're going to be learning from Z-Dog, who managed to win the solo series on OCE whilst playing on 80 ping. So a really good example, and we're going to learn lots. So before we get into any games, I just want to show you Z-Dog's game history, as I think there's something we can all learn from. So if you have a look, it's not actually that great compared to Oatly, who actually got 2 wins and 17 eliminations. But he actually had a lot of dudded games, so that's probably why he didn't win. Compared to Z-Dog, who was really consistent. He basically got top 15 every game, apart from this sort of last game here. He also didn't go crazy in the eliminations. I'm assuming a lot of these are just end game sort of refreshes. But my point is, even though Z-Dog wasn't placing the greatest in these games, he basically stayed positive and stayed consistent throughout the whole tournament and ended up placing very well. So you guys can follow this. So getting into the games, he lands freaky fields and he was contested by one other player. I talked about it in my previous video, but I like these inner corner drop spots because there's a lot of surge potentials on these sort of players that land fully edge. As you can see, he gets a gun and he's able to get 75 damage on this player before he even lands, which is really good for the new surge. If you guys didn't know, for all cups now that they've changed the surge where it's basically your damage dealt versus minus your damage taken. So it's basically your net damage. So if Z-Dog doesn't take any damage for the rest of the game now, he's going to be 75 up on Surge, which is basically quite high, and he'll be able to survive Surge for basically most zones. As you can see, Z-Dog is already leaving the POI, and this is important to note because a lot of you think that if you're contested that you basically have to force the fight, but that's not true at all. You can basically split a lot of drops, especially these sort of larger POIs. As you can see, it works very well for Z-Dog by basically doing this every game, as he's able to come away really stacked to basically play out the games. So the way you split these drops is kind of like a game of chess. So the enemy always lands these buildings here, whereas Z-Dog lands this barn here, and it's important to note that because he's basically cutting off the opponent's loot path, because he always wants this down here, but Z-Dog can basically land there and basically get some of that as well. Whereas if he landed this sort of like barn down here, then he would have been further away and the opponent would be able to claim that. And there's like a risk they could bump into each other here and get into an off-spawn fight, which obviously Z-Dog doesn't want to do in his consistency. So basically Z-Dog lands this barn and sort of gets tags on the enemies down here, and then sort of like loots this area and then disengages sort of out back here. To split drops, you also need to basically make sure you're really aware and keep track of where your enemy is. If you can sort of spot them, then even better. Z-Dog is doing this to the point where he's even sort of breaking walls here in case the opponent's sort of watching him and he runs out this barn. There's two sort of reasons you want to do this: to know what chests you can sort of actually claim, but also basically in these lobbies it's important that Z-Dog doesn't get tagged, because this enemy is obviously going to be going for some early tags and that could make Z-Dog sort of below the surge threshold. He's able to farm these big metal canisters basically in the drop spot, which nearly caps out his metal. This is really good sort of map knowledge. He basically knows what the high yield materials are around his drop. If you've watched any of my other videos, you also know that if you get your metal off spawn, you don't have to go and refarm it in the popular places in the mid game. So in Z-Dog's situation, that would be this OXR base, and basically all these players, as you can see, this guy's basically already rotating there to probably farm his metal. Because Z-Dog's playing passive for consistency and avoiding fights, he obviously wants to avoid these areas. So he actually ends up getting beamed here and loses a lot of HP, but his response is really solid and something you guys can learn from. Sort of refarms the brick he used, and what he's going to do now, you'll see if I fast forward, he's basically going to run all the way back into his POI, which is now in Storm. Obviously, again, not scared of taking Storm ticks, and basically he knows where he left all the heals in his drop spot, so he manages to get back to full shields. And he's then also going to use these spare crash pads, and basically you'll see he goes this way instead now. So really smart. He obviously got tagged from over here and knows it's heavily congested. As you can see, there's so many players over here. So instead, he's going to go over this way where he's basically got a free rotate. So Z-Dog runs into the same experience that a lot of us do in our cups. Gets beamed in the back by the infamous player that's not yet in zone. Although this can be really annoying, Z-Dog shows really good maturity here, and it's basically what I want you to do. So instead of sort of playing emotional, it's even more important now because a lot of people with the new surge, if they get hit with their damage, they're going to think immediately, oh, I need to tag them back to sort of balance out the surge. But even before that, a lot of players would play emotional and sort of have to think they have to get revenge tags. But as you can see, Z-Dog basically just protects himself. He's very aware of the enemy and basically carries on rotating. The reason he does this is basically he can, stay and try and hold this player and get some tags, but basically he knows if he sort of rotates early, he's going to get priority on all these players and he's going to be able to get up on this mountain, which you'll see in a minute, and he's basically able to sort of get back any surge that he's lost on all these players rotating in. But as I said, Z-Dog gets up on this hill and looks back for a surge. We're about to see how surge works in real time here. So he's 352 above right now, and we're about to see him get some tags. And as you can see, it now goes up to 400 above because he's basically dealt that damage, but he hasn't taken any back in return. So this is what you would refer to as a power position. You've probably heard that term. It's basically going sort of high up and elevated on the map. So anything like a mountain where you have sort of like a massive wide view of the map. So Z-Dog is basically holding all these players down here. And basically, like I said, where he identified these power positions early and got up on this mountain before a lot of other players did, he's basically able to, one, not get tagged by them himself, but also he's going to have a lot of surge opportunities on these players who didn't identify the power position, and they're basically scuffed for the rest of the game now, if not dead. So scouting is the one thing that turns bad rotates into good ones, and just by looking through the cone here, Z-Dog knows that if he was to fizz pad, this opponent would basically beam him out the air, so he needs to wait for him to leave himself. Don't get me wrong, especially in low elo, there is going to be them annoying players that don't sort of rotate themselves and just try and hold you and grief your game. But at least by scouting, you can then sort of find alternative paths to get you into zone. So in this case, he basically waits, he was there just a minute ago, he waits for this opponent to leave, and then Z-Dog can basically get a free fizz pad himself. And as you can see, he gets all the way into zone without even getting shot. So I talk about this a lot, but you really don't have to do any sort of crazy plays for refreshes. You mainly just have to be aware. If you sort of have bad awareness, you're probably actually missing sort of loads of free refreshes per game that you don't even know sort of existed. As you can see here, Z-Dog's just scouting in his cone, and then through good awareness, he sees his visual audio, he knows there's a player below him, and he just edits, and there's a player just literally like fully sort of like in his builds, and he just gets an easy kill here. But the important thing to note is he doesn't drop straight on it. He sort of identifies this wall here is not his, and there's a player there. So if he would have jumped on it, obviously there's a player right there, and he would have basically gone down. Leave it a second or two, see if anyone goes for it, and then make sure you to build around it with hard mats. And with that refresh, he now also picks up a sentinel. He was carrying AR and revolver all game, and it's important to note, it doesn't seem like a massive detail, but a lot of people almost think they have to have one loadout all game. So they think, oh, I want to carry double pump because I get a lot of kills in endgame with it, so I need to carry it all game. But as you can see, by carrying that AR, Z-Dog has been above surge comfortably all game. So if he didn't have that AR, if he had double pump instead, that wouldn't have happened. So don't stress about a loadout and think you have to have the same one all game. The sort of optimal one is basically what Z-Dog's done in this game, sort of have long range weapon for sort of surge tags, and then you can definitely, if you find sort of more fraggy loadouts end game, definitely pick that as well. So although it might not be crash pads meta next season, one thing that never changes with all rotation really, it would have been the same in mask meta. Like if Z-Dog tried to mask or use any sort of rotation here, there's a lot of players around him and a lot of builds, which means he basically can't use his rotation. But if you look what he does here, it's a really nice play. A lot of the pros do it as well. So he basically lets zone hit him, and what he's going to do is basically just take a few ticks. He runs into zone where there's basically no builds, and he basically crash pads over for free. So he took a bit of whites, but basically it saved him dying. What would you rather, lose a few whites or basically die with that medkit in your inventory. So again here, easy sort of refreshes because Z-Dog's basically claimed all these boxes, they're all his. We're now in the 10th zone, so there's going to be a lot of shamble players basically with no mats sort of running against his builds, so we'll see that in a minute. A guy runs through, hits him 154 and gets a nice refresh to there. Again, he's got very good awareness. He sort of sees there's a guy back here and gets another one as well. Gets sort of a lot of mats from that. The first one was pretty shambles, siphon only. But again, he just stays in storm here, doesn't panic, sort of like, oh no, I'm in storm, like it's authentic. Just waits and basically crash pads. And then whilst doing that, he actually basically sees Oatly on high and pumps him as he goes past. And then you'll see in a minute, Oatly then decides to give it up, which means Z-Dog can go up and take it for himself. So Z-Dog is now on height, but as you can see, he's got 0 materials. But a misconception is that you need sort of loads of materials to basically go for high ground. But if you think it's actually sort of the place where you use the least materials, because if he was down here, it'd be sort of full tarping, whereas up here, he would only be sort of placing floors and cones. Even though he's not going to go on to win this game, I think if he had sort of like an AR and more builds, he would have gone on to win this game. But just by sort of taking height off Oatly there, even though he's got 0 builds, he's still gone for it, because where would he rather be, up here or literally down here in all this with 0 builds? Do you know what I mean? Even if you take height early in some solo games, you can literally sort of like skip so many sort of like zones where people are full tarping, save loads of materials, and then even if you want to like drop down and not play it for the rest of the game. Z-Dog kind of does that here. He's not trying anything. He's basically just trying to maximize his placement. It's now a top 6. He's just waiting for more people to die below him. So when zone does come in and he's got no other option, he smartly kind of, I really love that play, sort of drops down on that wall and then basically sits on top of these builds here. And then as you can see, more people are dying down here. It's now a top 4. And then he's running low ground, gets that kill. So that's his top 3 and he's now got 4 kills as well. So literally a massive game, and it's probably what caused him to go on and win the cash cup. And then unfortunately, he has no builds again, falls all the way down, and then this guy above kills him. So a really nice game. I hope you guys learned a lot. If you're on high ping, as long as you have good game sense like this player does, you can go on to place really well in cups. I've got way more videos like this coming, especially for the new season, so make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of them. And if you're still eager to learn how to place better, you can watch this video to learn how to win more games.